Hi, I'm Roy from Roy's Garage. Today I'm going to be working on a 2004 Toyota 4Runner 4.7 liter automatic. Customer said the engine compartment was smoking, like steam was coming out. So anyway, when I checked it out, I noticed that this neck on the top of the radiator is broken off and the hose popped off. So I'm going to be replacing the radiator, upper and lower radiator hose, thermostat, the serpentine belt, and we're going to be flushing out the cooling system. These are the tools I'm going to be using today to do this job. Three different length screwdrivers, 3/8 ratchet, 1/4 inch ratchet, 3/8 impact wrench, 3/8 extension, another 3/8 extension, 12mm socket, another 12mm socket, 10mm socket, 8mm socket, 12mm wrench, plier, water pump plier, my gear wrench tool to remove and replace the serpentine belt, vice grip, a tool to remove my plastic retainer, long nose plier, and my airlift tool. These are the parts I'm going to be using today to do this job. This is some premix 50/50 extended life pink antifreeze. I'm going to be using about 2.5 to 3 gallons. Lower radiator hose, upper radiator hose, a brand new radiator, thermostat seal, and a serpentine belt. Okay, first we're going to be draining the radiator. I'm going to be opening up my petcock. It's going to be on the driver's side, the lower portion of the radiator, that white plastic petcock. We're going to be unscrewing it. So I'm under the vehicle, driver's side, front of the tire. I'm going to be unscrewing this plug. So we're going to be draining out the coolant. Just let it all drain out. So I'm going to be removing this plastic piece, removing these plastic retainers. Removing this cover. Removing this air intake. Removing this hose. Can kind of like just angle it and leave it like that. Removing this transmission cooler line. Removing the coolant recovery tank. Get 3 bolts, one here, and then one on this side. Removing the overflow tube. Removing the upper radiator hose. So I'm not going to be reusing these hoses, so with a razor blade I'm just going to cut the hose and split it open. We can remove the thermostat housing. So I'm going to be removing the serpentine belt. If you notice under the hood, there's a diagram. If you forget how to route the belt, it's always, this one is right under the hood. Okay. So I'm going to loosen my tensioner. Remove the belt. This belt is all worn out, so now is the time to change it. I'm going to be removing the fan. There's 4 bolts on the fan. So with my big screwdriver, I'm going to be prying, using this like a pry bar, and then loosening up the nut. Just do it to all 4. Removing the fan shroud, 1 bolt right here and another bolt right here. So now we're going to be pulling out the fan shroud with the fan. So you got to remove this strap. This what straps the cooler line to the fan shroud. There's another strap. Removing this lower transmission cooler hose. So I'm going to be removing the radiator. There's 4 bolts that bolt the radiator to the radiator support. 1 here, 1 here, and there's going to be 1 in there, and another one right there. So this guy, you gotta be real careful. You don't want to pull it out and that bolt falls down into the frame. So I'm using a magnet. So pulling out the radiator. So I'm going to be plugging up my trans cooler line with some spark plugs, because when I flush out the cooling system, I don't want any water to go into the line. So removing the thermostat, putting the housing back on. So I'm going to be using this flush gun to flush out the cooling system, screwing on my water hose, connecting my air. Okay, so I'm going to be flushing out the cooling system. I connected some hoses that I had lying around. So I directed the water flow away from me. So we're going to be pumping water and air from the lower hose up to the upper hose. Okay. So let this guy fill up and then pump this trigger and just blast it out with water and air. Okay, so I stopped the water flow. Now I'm going to be pumping the system with air. Get all the water out. Remove these hoses. Removing the thermostat housing. Okay, so these rubber grommets, there's 4 of them. One there, one here, and one here. We're going to be transferring that to the new radiator. Just pry it out. Just put it into the new radiator. Putting in this grommet into the new radiator. And there's a little tab over here. Got to make sure this thing faces upwards, so it's going to hook into the radiator support. So before we put the radiator in, we're going to be putting on the lower radiator hose first. Shoot some silicone spray. Make it a little easier to go on. Put the hose clamp on. And tighten up the clamp. Installing the radiator. Okay, so I'm going to be bolting down the radiator, brushing some anti-seize on my bolt. Gotta make sure you line up the tab. So I'm going to break off a piece of this paper towel, using it as a spacer, so this thing will hold my bolt in while I bolt it up. Putting the nut on the other end. Putting on the nut. Installing the trans cooler line. Putting some anti-seize on the water pump bolts and some on the water pump shaft. Installing the fan shroud. Connecting the trans cooler hose to the mount. Putting in the fan. Tightening the fan. Somebody got a wedge like on screwdriver or something in there to just hold the fan, stop them from turning, so you can tighten it up. Bolting the shroud up. Connecting my upper transmission cooler hose. Installing my serpentine belt. Putting my rubber seal around the thermostat. So this is a bleeder screw. When you put the thermostat in, make sure this is on the up position. Putting some anti-seize on my threads. Putting on the thermostat housing. Tightening up my housing. So I'm going to be connecting my lower radiator hose to my thermostat housing, spraying some silicone lube, make it a little easier to slip in. Slide it on, tightening the clamp, putting on my upper hose, shooting some silicone spray in the hose. Put my hose clamp on. Put this hose clamp on. I'll be cleaning out the reservoir. Bolting up my coolant reservoir tank. Putting on the air intake tube. Connecting this vacuum hose. Clamping this side. Putting on this cover. Bolting this guy down. Putting on my overflow hose. So now I'm going to vacuum out the cooling system and put the antifreeze in. Okay, so I'm going to be installing my airlift tool to vacuum out the cooling system. So I got my airlift tool all connected. So now with my air hose, I'm going to connect it. I'm going to pull a vacuum. It's going to be pulling about 15-16 inches of vacuum. You notice right now the hose is all collapsed. That's good. That's what you want. If your hose doesn't collapse, then you got a big air leak someplace. Okay, that should be good enough. Shut off the valve. Disconnect my air hose. Connect this other hose. Make sure this end is in the antifreeze bottle. Open up the valve, and it's going to suck the antifreeze really fast. So you got to make sure that you don't run out of antifreeze in this bottle. You don't want it to suck air. So when it starts getting a little low, switch bottles. Okay, that's good. Topping off my radiator. Putting on a new radiator cap. Filling up my coolant recovery tank. Taking off my vice grip. Putting that guy back in. Putting on this plastic piece. Putting on some new plastic retainers. Okay, so I'm going to start it up. So I ran it through the heat cycle. I road tested the vehicle, came back, let it cool down, topped off the antifreeze, and you're good to go. So if you have any questions, comment below. Make sure to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and I see you in the next video. Aloha.